Either a frustrating or perhaps a fortuitous split in San Francisco, depending on how you look at it, could really go either way. But one way or another, Padres are just kind of scraping by right now. We will discuss the four-gamer in San Francisco, how we feel about it, how we feel about this team. Manny's hot. Tatis is trying to get there. Some random injuries that have kind of popped up. There's much to discuss and a wonderful person to discuss it with, Annie Heilbrunn. Been trying to get Annie on the pod for years and years. She's one of the best and kind enough to give us a few minutes in a week where Derek is enjoying some time off. Annie kind enough to be with us, and very, very much looking forward to catching up with her on the pod for the first time. It's crazy that's taking this long, but here we are, excited about it. Thanks to OG's, the sponsor of the On Friar podcast. Appreciate all they do for On Friar and the NBC7 sports team. If you want to go out, get a good meal, catch a Padres game, maybe watch NBA Finals, Stanley Cup Finals, whatever else is going on, OG's is a great place to do it. Great menu. Constantly doing specials, awesome beer menu as well, and a bunch of locations around San Diego County. So thanks to OGs for all they do for the On Fire podcast. Without further ado, the walk-up music. It is the On Fire podcast brought to you by NBC7. I am Darnay Tripp. Pleased to finally be joined by, there she is, Annie Heilbrunn is with us finally on the On Fire podcast. Annie, how do we find you on this Thursday afternoon?
Darnay, I'm doing great. I'm very happy to be here. I'm glad we could make it work. It's been a running joke for us in the clubhouse of when I was going to come on the podcast, but thank you very much for having me. I am honored to be here.
Today is that day. I don't know if I'd be honored to be here, but we appreciate your presence one way or another. You slumming it with us for the next 30, 45 minutes or so, and very much appreciate your time. One of my favorites always to run into at the clubhouse in the press box or wherever these jobs take us. So glad to be doing this as well and in this format. And when I think of Annie, I often think of like being in the middle of the scrum, asking some of the hard-hitting questions, trying to get at the heart of what's going on with these San Diego Padres. So I'll start you with this. If you were in the clubhouse after this four-game series, after a couple wins that could have gone against them, a couple losses that could have gone their way, what's the question top of mind for Annie? What do you want to ask these guys? What do you want to get at after a four-game series like this?
I'd probably get to something about whether they feel like they left anything on the table or what their perspective is on the split, because getting a split in a four-game series on the road is typically not bad. I mean, playing on the road is tough. Obviously, you want to win the series, but to be able to get it out of there with a split is not the end of the world. But I'd probably want to get to their perspective on if they feel like they left anything on the table on these, because they were all such close games. They were one-run games. They took a few early, but whether or not they felt like they could have gotten out of there with the series or even a sweep, probably would have been somewhere I would have leaned to.
I don't necessarily know how I feel about it at this point, because like Monday and Tuesday could have easily gotten away from them. Wednesday obviously got away from them. Thursday, Cease has the one big inning that does get away from him. They give themselves opportunities, some hard hit balls the last couple of nights that if they drop, you're maybe looking at 3 of 4 or maybe even a 4-game sweep. And so it really cuts both ways. And so maybe it's a cop out, but I kind of look at it as just like it's a wash. It's a 2-game sweep.
Yeah.
I don't think you can, or split. I don't think you can feel too bad about it. Is there anything that tips the scales either way for you, whether you feel like, all right, that could have been a whole lot worse, or like you said earlier, we left some meat on the bone?
No, this team is so confusing right now. I mean, it really is, because if you look at, you're absolutely right, Darnay. If you look at the box scores, if you were like a random person and you're like, I'm going to go look at the box scores for these games, maybe minus the third game, because they had quite a few hits in that one, but the first two and the last one, you wouldn't be able to, if you saw, oh, the Padres lost, you'd look at all the statistics in the box score and you'd be like, oh, well, yeah, like they left runners on base, runners in scoring position. They didn't have a ton of hits. So it's one of those things where it's like their offense isn't firing on all cylinders. They're still able to get the win. You can look at it two ways. You can either look at that like they are learning how to win in these tight games, similar to how they did last year. They're learning how to manufacture runs, find some ways to steal some, to take some wins, even when it doesn't look like they're going to walk out of there with a victory, which I think is really valuable. I mean, when you talk to players who talk about having postseason experience and what veterans can provide sometimes in those situations, they'll talk about learning how to win when it's not so simple as just like hit the home run or whatnot. So I think that it's very valuable to learn how to win. The other side of the coin, though, is this a house of cards? And they took a few there. They took a few games, and this offense just kind of isn't quite going to get going. I think one of the things you just mentioned is promising, which is they were hitting the ball really hard. They were hitting the ball really hard right at people. That typically is a sign that they're still doing all right. They're going to be able to have a few of those hits drop. But even Manny Machado said it after the game. We've been a little bit unlucky lately. We've been hitting the ball hard, but right at people. He said, I hope that luck is going to turn when we need it most. And that is all you can really hope for kind of in these situations, because their offense definitely is still not where they would want it to be.
No question about that. And you mentioned some missed opportunities. That Tuesday 3-2 win in 10 innings where Manny drives in a couple runs in the ninth to force extras. They were 2 for 12 with runners in scoring position and left 13 on. And they won that game. And then on the flip side, you mentioned exit velocity on Thursday. They had the top 5 of the game, 7 of the top 8. Let's see how many over 100. They had Iglesias had one at 95, and then they had 7 over 500, 7 exit velocities over 100, including the Fernando Tatis Jr. flyout that got a mini bat flip on. I think he thought maybe he had it. The Jackson Merrill flyout, I believe that one was in the ninth inning as well. And so, I mean, they were right there. There were opportunities. And I don't know if you saw Letters to AJ on Twitter is a great follow. And he posted about Tatis and that ball he hit in the 8th. Before today, only 14 batted balls in the Statcast era were hit with exactly 108 exit velocity, 23-degree launch angle, and a straightaway trajectory. 13 were home runs. 1 was a double.
So that tells you some of that unluckiness that Manny Machado is talking about. That's kind of where they're at, right? I mean, that was a ball that you thought was going out of the yard, or that he thought, or that the team thought. Crony had a really hard one hit too. Merrill had some really hard hit balls. Manny got that one that was taken away from him too. That hit that was taken away from him. I forgot who caught it, but I mean, made a heck of a play, a leaping jump there to make the grab. So, that could be true, right? And also it's really hard to tell. The Giants aren't clicking on all cylinders either, right? And you can tell that their offense is struggling too. So you had two teams that are trying to get their offenses going. And then you also, I know everyone hates to tip the cap. They did have some good pitching. They have had some good pitching. The key to it for the Padres is going to be how can you find ways, and they showed it in the first few games, to win against some really good pitching, because that's not going to slow down. You're going to have really good pitching all the way through the year and into the postseason. So again, that's kind of where you look at it, like manufacturing runs and finding a way to get 2 of those wins. Okay, that could be really positive. But then, and then, like you said, the hard hit balls and being able to get some of those to drop, I think is a huge thing for this team. As soon as that happens, they should be in business. But their offense has been sputtering, starting, stopping. And some of that is good pitching, but you kind of do wonder when they're going to be able to sort of get it going again. But they're winning, Darnay. I mean, 6-4 in the last 10.
And I think you made a great point that I wanted to circle back to. It does feel very Shilty, right? I mean, these are Shilty type of grit squad, winners find solutions types of series. And, in relation to Monday and Tuesday wins. And we've seen a bunch of those lately. And so I think from that standpoint, if that seemed a little bit fluky, if this was kind of a feast or famine type of team, you might say, okay, like they're just kind of getting lucky. But they're also winning the way Mike Shildt teams, at least as far as we know them here in San Diego in his relatively short time as a manager, that's kind of how they've won. And so it doesn't feel, that makes it feel less fluky. It makes it feel, I mean, I don't know how sustainable stretches like this ever are, but makes it feel like, okay, there's something to this. It's not just by luck that they won some of these games. There's always going to be some element of that involved, but this is kind of the profile of this baseball team. And might I remind you, last June 4th, they were in the midst of being swept in Anaheim this time last year. And they were 32-32 on June 4th. And they've gotten themselves a little bit of cushion with the way that they started the season and by kind of scratching and clawing their way with some of these wins. And so I think there's reason to err on the bright side, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think until they show us, until they slip, right? What are they? Are they still 10 games? Are they 10 games over 500 right now? Or I know they're a few games behind the Dodgers now. I think 2 at the time of us recording this. What's the record? I don't have it. Sorry.
They are 35-26. They're 9 games over now.
Okay, so to me, until they really slip in that, I think that you can kind of still think to yourself, hey, this is a team that's going to be able to pull out of things. This is a team that's gotten, like you said, a pretty good cushion, and they've been able to, even when they're not playing at their best, even when their offense isn't clicking, they've been able to still get more wins than losses during this time. So if they can keep that trend up, then either what's going to happen is their offense is going to come back to form and they're going to dominate, provided they still have good pitching. Or they're going to be able to still just hopefully stay in the race, right? Like maybe they're going to fall back a little, but then they're going to get some wins, kind of stay right in the race there, because this wild card and this playoff race and this whole National League is kind of in, a lot of them are in that same position where they're sort of jockeying, and it's still too early. I mean, there's so much that can happen between the All-Star break even and the end of the year. But I think that they're in a good position. I mean, for them to be 9 games over 500 right now and to admittedly say in the clubhouse, we're not playing as well as we know we can play, I think is a good sign for them, or at least, like you said, a reason for optimism. Now, they've got 2 right now with Xander Bogaerts, and I'm sure we'll get to it, and Luis Arraez, who we don't know, are they coming back? Are they not? Are they going to be out? You've got a few pitchers on the injured list. You've got a bullpen that is like a normal bullpen right now that's kind of also finding its way sometimes and is prone to some vulnerability, just like any other bullpen. So kind of you do wonder, hey, how long can they keep that going? But I want to just really quickly touch on what you said. These are kind of Shildt kind of wins because they put pressure on the pitcher. The Giants closer, Duvall didn't have his stuff at all on Monday. It was awful. But at the same time, the Padres also pressured him. When you've got the bases loaded, or you've got 2 guys on base, and then you've got Manny Machado coming up, or whatever that sequence was, that is pressure, and they were taking good at bats there, and they were kind of letting him get himself out. And Manny swung at the right. If he said it even after the game, if he would have allowed that to be a ball, he probably would have walked Manny and walked in 1 run, but they wouldn't have won the game, So I think that they're being smart in some certain places, strategic. They're going to need to make sure that they clean up the base running as best as they can and the defense, but the defense and the base running for the most part this season has been really good, So I think that there are still like a lot of reasons for optimism. And then there's certainly some things to keep an eye on. That's for sure.
Rusty Strings chiming in on the chat, and if you're watching live on YouTube, get in the chat, let us know what you think. Say hi to Annie if you have any questions for Annie. Hit the chat and we'll include them on the pod. They were 1 player away from winning 2 games. They lost up in San Francisco this time last year. It was 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I think they'll start hitting when the weather gets warm, which has kind of often been the case.
It has been the case, Darnay. And as we know with Mike Shildt, he is a second half genius, right? And his teams do better in the second half. This would be if the Padres don't continue at least playing over 500 ball in the second half, this would be the first time in Mike Shildt's career. So of course that could happen. I mean, this is baseball. It could easily happen that they don't have a great second half. But if they're able to just kind of stay where they are, or at least stay a little bit ahead of, in front of 500, and then hopefully keep that pace in the second half, it's a tough wild card, or it's a tough National League race, but some teams are going to slip out of it too. I'm not sure, with the Giants, how they're going to, right now they're right in it. Are they going to stay in it? Are the Diamondbacks going to stay in it? Where are these teams going to be at? The Braves were sort of contesting a little bit. Now they're pulling back again. So there's just so much time to go. But I do think, Darnay, that there's reasons for optimism there as much as there is questions as well.
And this is one of those, I don't necessarily know what to do with it, but they've also kind of been in the stretch for like close to a month where they're really having to like grind to get wins. I mean, if you go back to the Angels series in mid-May, Tatis had his first career walk-off homer. Then in Atlanta a couple weekends ago, he had the Manny had the homer late after Acuna had homered in a 2-1 game. They win that one. Sunday of that weekend, they homer in the 6th, 7th, and 8th, come back to beat the Braves. They have to walk off to beat the Marlins at Petco Park, and the next day come back from a 6-0 deficit to beat the Marlins. Then this past weekend, they get going in the 6th inning, beat the Pirates 3-2. They're down 4-1. What was it on Sunday? And then they have the big 7th inning to beat the Pirates, and then the 2 wins against the Giants. And so this has kind of been a trend now that extends beyond just this Giants series where they're having to really grind to get wins. Does that mean this is who they are? I don't necessarily know. There's obviously been some injuries during this stretch. There's been some slumps during this stretch, but it's been going for a while. And so maybe that makes me expect kind of the leaf to turn at some point, because it's been more than just a week or two. It's been close to a month that they've really had to grind.
It is such a good point, Darnay. And listen, those games are exhausting. They're in the middle of a 26 and 27 game stretch. They'll have that one off day after the Dodgers. That's it. These are all very hard fought games. Think about the Dodgers series, then they're going to face the Diamondbacks, then they're going to face the Dodgers again. Like Manny said it after today's game, in the last game in San Francisco. He said, these are division games. They're played harder. Every little detail counts. Every little, tiny thing counts. Everything matters. So you think about that just in terms of exhaustion, right? I mean, this is where they're really going to have to dig deep, and where they're going to have to manage off days and manage, when they're ahead, if they're ahead at all, to go ahead and the game isn't close, to go ahead and pull some guys out and whatnot, because it mentally taxes you too. These kinds of games are mentally taxing. Now, if you're on the winning side of most of them, I think that overrides some of that. But if you start grinding and losing, right, like they can become very exhausting very fast. So the physical grinding, the mental grinding, it's not totally sustainable in my opinion. So either they're going to go towards domination or there might be a little, slipping right there. Yeah. And who knows? I mean, like you just talked about, they were not in this position last year. They were, barely trying to play 500 ball. And at the All-Star break, 50 and 50 or whatever. What were they, like 500, right? Like they were one game under.
Yeah, I think they were one game over. I think they lost their first game to the Guardians to put them at 50 and 50, and then they went on their 43 and 19 or whatever it was.
So in that respect, this is a really good stretch. And if they started off strong, and that's the only hot streak that they're going to have, because after that first 14-3 start to the season, they've really been playing mostly 500 ball. I haven't done the calculations lately, but it's definitely not been that 14-3 stretch, right? As we know. But they could then get another week or two, who knows, somewhere in the season where they just shoot all the way up. Of course, I won't say the obvious. It could go the other way too, right? But I guess I just did. But yeah, but they could shoot, 2 weeks, a week or two of really strong baseball. And now you're jumping some people in the standings. You don't know what's going to happen in the trade deadline either. So if they can maintain health, and these injuries that they're having are not too serious, which we'll find out, and they can sort of just keep their head above water and keep grinding some of these games out, like you said, hopefully they fall back into some dominant offense along the way.
Yeah. Speaking of those injuries, I'm sorry I had to post this in response to your tweet the other day, because it just seems too appropriate, and there's been a lot of them this year where Mike Shildt is just talking, and I'm like, oh, it doesn't seem so bad. Oh, the window's open for this to be terrible. Like, I don't know what to believe. And Mike Shildt is a very good manager in a lot of ways, but I don't know if he's the best when it comes to sharing injury updates. Maybe it's good because it always does seem kind of confusing. But after today's game, Luis Arraez, they think it's a day-to-day thing, but not completely out of the weeds, because they need to kind of make sure, and something with the back of the knee. Knees are always a little bit, concerning. Then, of course, Xander Bogaerts felt something in the same shoulder that he injured last year. He was kind of like an emergency guy. Today, they hope he'll be back in Milwaukee. I don't know. Still haven't seen Michael King yet. What's Yu Darvish up to? No clue.
This is where we're at with injuries. And partly the Padres did trend over the years toward the more Bill Belichick type of injury reports. This was I would say before even this year, before even Mike Shildt, they trended during the Jace Tingler era. They started to trend toward real Bill Belichick, style of injury reports. And typically in baseball, it's not like football in that sense where everything is so guarded. Typically in baseball, you get a decent amount of information. I understand where the Padres come from in terms of Mike Shildt is very much about gamesmanship. So is AJ Preller. I understand that they don't want to let everything out. I do think that there's also some confusion. I think that they also are waiting to find out. Sometimes with these injuries, you even look at Dylan Cease today, took that comebacker to his forearm, and the adrenaline of being in that moment could have allowed him to pitch. But how he wakes up tomorrow, how he wakes up the next day, that's because he talked even after the game about how it was more sore after the game than it was in the moment. You don't know how things are always going to react, right? I mean, how they feel in that moment is a lot different than how they could feel 24 to 48 hours later. Plus, when they're doing imaging and x-rays, when you're on the road, when can you get back to like the machinery or the type of x-rays that would make you feel a little better? Because there's so much here on the road, but they've got other doctors and other things here and there, blah, blah, blah. So I do think that I don't think that they're trying to be totally like, cover up and conspiracy and everything like that. I think that they definitely don't want to give anything away. That is what Mike Shildt preaches. Take everything, give nothing away. But I do think in some cases they are also just like, wait and see. We got to figure it out. I don't know. We'll evaluate it. Mike Shildt said earlier this season they got burned on an injury report. And so he's aware. Yeah, they got burned on an x-ray, so he's a little aware, I think, of kind of the perception out there. And I do think that they're trying to give as much as they can, but at the same time, not alarm people because they don't know exactly. They don't want to, necessarily alarm the players even or the clubhouse. The other side of that is Mike Shildt is very optimistic. And even today, he talked about Luis Arraez's injury. He said, I don't think it's going to be concerning. But then when he was pressed a little bit toward the end, he said, well, we're still evaluating, but I'm an optimist. So it's like, we don't really know. It's essentially kind of where we're at. We don't really know. But if he says, hey, we don't know anything, people are probably going to be upset at that as well. So you really kind of can't win in some of those situations. But hopefully it's not too serious. I mean, Xander Bogaerts' shoulder, that is the same soreness that he was feeling after his surgery last year is what that sounds like, which is not a great sign, but hopefully manageable. And then you've got Arraez, the back of the knee. I can't even guess what necessarily that is. Like maybe he pulled or strained something. I don't know. We'll find out on that. Yu Darvish, they're leaving it really to you. This is a tough one, because no one really knows what's going on there. And they're kind of letting you dictate the timeline for it out of respect for him and how he knows his body is going to react and what he knows about his, hundreds of years being a pitcher. And that is, fair to do because Yu is very in touch with his body and how he feels in his arm and everything like that. But there's really not a lot of, clarity there. I mean, we don't even know when Yu comes back. Is this something that now that he's been out this long, is it fixed when he comes back? Or is it something that can flare up again? We don't even really know what's going on there. And Michael King, same. Like, it's great that Michael King feels good about where his injury was at. He talked before they left on the road trip and he was in good spirits. He said, my doctor thinks it's going to be more on the week side and not the month side, but he's so limited in his movement right now. You just don't know how it's going to react when he finally ramps up his movement, so it's a lot of hope it's not too long. Yeah.
I will say, like, if I had to choose, I would go with Mike Shildt sort of clumsily working his way through these injury updates over the true Bill Belichick method, because the Bill Belichick method doesn't give us a whole lot to talk about or go on unless you just are railing against him not saying anything about injuries. Shildt at least gives us something to talk about. And there's always like a line, a gem, some sort of nugget that you can at least like try and figure something out based on or talk about or what have you. Do you remember, you got me going back, I think it was after Manny in 2022 turned his ankle really bad against Colorado. Mm-hmm. Bob Melvin's the manager. and I think Bob had a health issue. And I think a couple of, maybe, was it Ryan Christensen, Matt
Yeah.
Williams, like their other guys got like COVID or something like that. And Ryan Flaherty had to step in and play manager for a couple games. And of course, he's thrown in Monday. I think they're playing the Braves maybe after the Rockies series. And so everybody's asking about Manny Machado. Do you remember how visibly uncomfortable Ryan Flaherty was trying to answer these questions without giving any information away? And oh, by the way, he's having to like cosplay as manager for the first time ever. It was painful.
Yeah, I do. It's funny you bring that up because I was sidelining for those series. I was on the road with them when Manny hurt his ankle. I mean, it was like, horrific. And then when Manny came back, I was sidelining on those, and it was like, here he is, he's back, he's playing, and whatnot. Flaherty is cut from the same cloth as AJ Preller. The two of them are very close, and AJ kind of championed him along the way, and so they are along those same lines of the people do not always need to know, and I think that they're trying to get a little bit. I really do think they're trying. I don't want this to come across like they're trying to hide everything and whatnot. But yeah, I do think that there is also some, like you said, some uncomfortability when you're thrown into the manager role for the first time, and then everyone's sticking their microphone in your face. And remember, Ryan is an Orioles guy with Manny, so Ryan probably also knows Manny and knows that, he doesn't want everything probably out there right now, or maybe he's still trying to work through it. So fun times in baseball. You just never know what the day is going to bring.
All right, so let's get into a couple guys' psyches, one being Mike Shildt. And one thing I've noticed this year is Mike's kind of gone at reporters less than he did last year. And even during this tough stretch where he's asked questions about what's going on with his team and this and that, it felt very random last year when he got a little bristled and kind of pushed back a little bit. And there was like a stretch around this time of year where it seemed like it was happening relatively often. This year, now granted, they got off to a great start, but they've had this long stretch, but it seems like it's a more affable Mike Shildt, where he'll push back and say, well, I think this, or I see it this way, but it's maybe not as like aggressive, or he seems less perturbed. Am I right? Like, do you think it's like he's proven something now? He's not having to win people over. He did it. So maybe feels like he's got a little bit more benefit of the doubt. I've wondered that as the season's gone on and they've been in this kind of up and down stretch, like when are we going to get bristly Mike Shildt? And he hasn't, at least that I can recall, has not really shown up so far this year.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting observation. I think you're right. That has been the case that I've seen as well. I think, hey, I would only be speculating here, but maybe you're right. It's like you kind of come in that first year, you're a little unsure of necessarily how you want to play things. And I actually don't think that Mike Shildt was trying to intentionally be one way or another. I think that he was truly looking at things like from such a positive and optimistic point of view that it confuses him why everyone else doesn't. Yeah, it's interesting, but I also think, who knows, maybe also a contract, getting that extension and being here longer and knowing that, hey, like you said, everybody's bought in. We can move forward. We had a good year last year. I've got a contract extension for a little while longer now. I can just sort of maybe take more of a deep breath and realize that, I think everybody's trying to do their job. I think when you look at the media, a lot of times, people are trying to get some explanation for a story on deadline, usually, or trying to learn something for the most part. I mean, I certainly can say when I ask questions, a lot of times I'm trying to learn, and so I think that, there's kind of hopefully that understanding between the two sides, but yeah, I think that Mike definitely wants to, or maybe does feel like a little bit more comfortable. But I also don't think that he was trying to be bristly last year. He just, I think, was genuinely like, this is a good team. Why don't maybe why don't you guys see it, right? Like, or meeting all of us, right? And so we'll see.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And JDS third. It is great to see Annie. Please have her on more. Thanks, Darnay. We'll have
Thanks,
to,
JDS.
more than once every 6 years. We're gonna have to make this happen, Annie. What is your not to get on too much of a tangent? What is your, for the aspiring journalists out there, reporters? Do you have a key, a secret, something you try and do to extract that useful bit of information when you're talking to an athlete or a coach that might not want to give it all up, or might make it challenging for you, or maybe it's a hard set of circumstances? Is there any like rule of thumb for Annie Heilbrunn in trying to like get to the heart of the matter?
I think always remember that they're human, right? And as much as they can seem robotic out there, it's good to remember that they're human. Some of them can handle questions that are very direct, and some of them will take offense at questions that are very direct. And sometimes it can be hard, for a reporter, especially for people who are more national or who are drop-in reporters, to kind of learn what is that player's type, and you have to ask the direct questions sometimes because you're only there for a day or two, especially for some of these drop-in reporters, and you've got to get your questions asked and get your story, and you might only have 2 minutes with this player. But for those of us that are here on a night in, night out basis, or someone that wants to be more of a beat reporter, I think you really have to just kind of look at them as human beings first and try to get to know them a little bit. Some of them, again, don't want to be get to known. Some of them are more approachable about that than others, but that's kind of the part of it. And I think that's also kind of what makes a manager's job these days and Mike Shilt's job so different, is you really have to understand as best as you can every single personality in there, and they're all so different, and then there's language barriers, or there's different ways that people grew up that are sometimes, can affect a conversation or whatnot. So I think just trying to be as understanding, but for the most part, I think that they will respect you if you did your homework and you are fairly direct and authentic.
You do some kind of lengthier one-on-ones. Who in the clubhouse right now, if you know you've got a one-on-one slated for that day, you're like excited about it?
You know what, Darnay? I know this is going to sound stupid, but I'm excited about every single one of them. I
Oh,
really
no,
am.
no, no, Annie. No, no, no. You got to give me one person. You got to give me one person, because it's all on a spectrum, right? And there's some
Yes.
people where you're like excited to talk to them, but there might be part of you like, all right, I'm going to have to really mind my P's and Q's and, ask the
Yeah.
questions the right way and that sort of thing. Purely from like, I'm excited to talk to this person because they're going to give me good stuff, and I'm not going to have to be perfect. I'm not going to have to, phrase these questions so precisely. Is there somebody that you feel like it's just going to be fun and an enjoyable conversation? Is there somebody that fits that mold?
I mean, I feel like they could all fit that mold, Darnay. I'm gonna go with Jason Adam. I don't think that you would have to be
Okay. Yeah.
perfect with him, and I think that he's an interesting guy and has a lot of interest as well that are outside of baseball that are pretty interesting, and I think could joke around as well back. But I think a lot of those superstar guys too, like Fernando, Manny, Jackson, you'd have to definitely come to the table prepared with them. But I think that they would enjoy a little banter every once in a while if they did it.
Yeah, and Adam, I think it was last week in that loss. Who were they playing against Miami in the series finale? Had a tough afternoon, and he faced the
Yeah.
bullets like a pro. Okay, back to the psyche. Tatis, a lot of body language experts, a lot of people trying to get into his psyche right now. You have probably talked to and interacted with Fernando as much as most anybody in the market. What have you observed about Fernando lately, or just in general when he's maybe having some of these lows? Because I think he is the type of player, the highs are very, very obvious and it's fun and we love it. The lows are very, very obvious and it's not as good a time. And there's part of me that feels like next step in the maturation process of Fernando Tatis Jr. is just being here. Now you can be excitable and fun, and he is the heartbeat in many ways. So you still want that. But I've thought for a couple years, man, if you could just get that baseline where it's sort of blank, highs and lows, then that might really do something for him. But what have you seen, especially the last month or so when things have been a bit tough?
It's been hard for him. There's no doubt about it. And I thought that his quotes that he gave Kevin Acee of the San Diego Union Tribune, talking about how he's not happy. He's just simply not happy when he's not playing well. And this has been a tough stretch. I thought I appreciated his honesty. I thought, you know what? I understand where he's coming from. He wears it. I mean, I think if you look at it from this angle, he truly cares. It bothers him. It eats at him. He isn't just saying, well, I'm making X amount of millions of dollars. So whatever, he really does want to be the guy. And I think that that's part of it. He has to let go of being the guy. He is the guy already. There's so much to love about Fernando Tatis Jr. And we've seen those highs and those lows. And again, I appreciated him saying, yes, they're real, because I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, all of those things. But I do agree with you where, he came into the season, and I feel that he has matured. Like, he has had to let go of some of the celebrity and some of the status and some of the expectations, just by virtue of what's happened over the last few years, whether it be the injuries, whether it be the suspension. And he's handled all of it. He's handled the injuries, he's handled the suspension, he came back, he handled fans giving it to him, almost to the point where he became a sweetheart again. Fans love the fact that he would give it back, or he would have fun with them. He started to get some of his power back. We started to see some of his velocities and his power be just as good as they were before he had the suspension. I think it's all still right in front of Fernando Tatis Jr., but he's 26 years old, I believe. 26. He's gone through a lifetime before even getting to 26. Like, he's already lived a lifetime. And I think that there will be a point for him, like you said, where I want Fernando to be happy. Look, I want him to hit too. Of course, so does he, so does everyone. But like, Fernando is at his best when he's happy, when he's just joyful, when he's loving the game. And it honestly breaks my heart a little bit to see him that upset, and I think, but I think back to me in my 20s, and every little thing, does sometimes grate at you. And I think that will be part of his maturation and part of his wisdom as he gets older. Manny's had to learn that. Xander's had to learn that. Everybody just kind of has to learn that in their own time, that like you said, you've got to find that middle ground, because this game will eat you alive. And he knows that. His dad, I mean, all the people that he has around him, the huge superstar players that he's grown up with, or that he's known, or that he can call. They all, he knows what's going on here. But I think for him, it's a matter of, he's got to find it in himself. Like, it's just, he knows it's not always going to be easy. But I think for him to start out the season like that, MVP numbers, of course, an early MVP race, but to start out in those conversations, and then to fall off the way he did. And, this is a guy who finally came into the season feeling like, the arm is good, the shoulder is good, the wrist is good. I'm a few years away from the suspension now. Like, this is my time. Unfortunately, this is where he's at. He's back down kind of in that ditch, and he's going to have to be the one to pick himself up and then go forward. And then hopefully he learns from that, and he's able to do it a little easier the next time. The one thing about Fernando too, Darnay, is it's like what his strength is sometimes also what his weakness is. He's so, emotional, and in a good way sometimes, but it can also be in a bad way. And he's so energetic, but it can also, the highs are high, like you said, the lows are low. But for him, I think you don't want to necessarily completely strip him of who he is. You don't want to make him like flat, and he's got to kind of push against that as well, because he still contributes. I think that's something that he's learning to do. We saw it in this series against the Giants: get on base, steal a bag, play great defense, take good at bats when possible, at least work the pitcher a little bit. And I think those are all good signs, in the sense of like, have a productive out if you have to, in the sense of just still contributing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I almost like get relieved or feel optimistic when an athlete does just say, yeah, I suck right now. Even like Manny, I think he had a revelation like that with
Xander
Kevin.
says it. Yeah.
Yeah, at around this time last year, when he's coming off the elbow, the hip deal popped up, he wasn't himself. The team was kind of scuffling, and sort of the Padres hit their stride in step with Manny Machado. And I don't know, sometimes I feel like we all have these things in our own way. You almost want to push them off, like, no, I'm not struggling. Things are fine, and that can make it harder than just acknowledging, okay, I'm going through a tough time, It's all out there. I'm not afraid to admit it. And now what do we do going forward? It's like you kind of like shed the shame of it and, acknowledge to everybody like, yeah, things aren't great right now, but we're going to figure this out. And I think in some way that can kind of help you turn the page or maybe take the edge off of it a little while, because you can tell right now, like he's feeling it. So
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think for him, it is important. You still, he talked about it in that article too. He still needs to be a good teammate, because you don't want to be playing with someone necessarily that is only happy when things are good, right? Like that's part of baseball, is such a game of failure. You've got to learn to be able to be still a good teammate, and he is, Fernando is, I saw him out at BP the other day, and again, he was still in this, bad offensive place, but he was completely engaged, talking to all his teammates, having a great time, dapping them up, just having, playing out there like he normally does. And I think when you see stuff like that, like those are good signs. He still meets Manny after a home run, still jumps out there. And that's what you want to see from him. You want to see him still continuing to be a good teammate and a responsible teammate for the rest of the guys.
It's the family. You and I are the most knowledgeable and intelligent Padres insiders out there. How about that?
The check is in the mail, Chris.
We owe you beers. Let's talk about Manny. I got to get you out here in a few minutes. But it would be irresponsible not to acknowledge just the run that he's been on. And as it turns out, that slump that he was on lasted all of 4 games. It's amazing how like one series or 1 week for Manny Machado can cause everybody, Jim Russell, to sound the alarms when it is maybe a little bit premature. He had that long hitting streak. He was, playing out of his mind, and then was cold against Seattle, the beginning of the series against the Blue Jays, but then had a 2-hit game, went 0 for 5 in the series finale against the Blue Jays, then had 3 straight 2-hit games, in one of which he homered. That was against Atlanta, and then has been very, very steady. Kind of like 2022 version of Manny Machado, a little bit more power, which has been good to see. And of course, homered again today against the Giants, got on base there in the 9th, gave them a chance. 4-hit game on Tuesday, including, of course, the hit in the 9th that sent them into extras and ultimately on their way to the win. He has been awesome. He's having an awesome season. What are his numbers now? 314 with an 864 OPS, and some clutch situations as well. And that seems to be kind of the knock on Manny, is like, okay, he's been really good, but what's the Manny moment? And there's been a fair share of at least regular season Manny moments lately. So love to see the way he shook off the mini slump that he dealt with in May.
Such great points, Darnay. And I love that you use the word clutch, because Manny is clutch. Not everyone is going to be 10 out of 10 every time. There's not player out there. I mean, it's just how it goes, so he is clutch, and he has been for the team this year, and hopefully he can continue to be, but this team is better, when he obviously is doing what he does. And I do think with Manny too, there is something to, he's maturing as well. I think you can see it in him that he's also maturing. I think fatherhood has been very good for him. I think he's developed a different side to himself. So it's been fun to watch Manny start to break through some of these numbers. Home run number 350 today. It puts him in rare company. He's gearing toward some Hall of Fame type numbers, if he can stay healthy and he can continue his career. So it's fun to watch Manny kind of evolve in San Diego from the guy that he was when he first came over was the Orioles and the Dodgers, and then came over to San Diego. So, this is for Manny too. You look at it and it's like him and Eric Hosmer, these were the guys that started this whole kind of turnaround in terms of what this Padres team was going to be. So I think for Manny, he's seen the highs, he's seen the lows in San Diego, and you're starting to get, like you just mentioned with Fernando, what you would hope for Fernando. You get a real steady Manny, a real where Mike Shildt might say, no, they're playing great, no problem. Manny will say, no, we had struggles with runners in scoring position. We haven't been playing as well. He'll start to get some of that accountability and responsibility in a good way, right? In a good way to kind of say, these are areas that we can improve on. So I think it's been fun to watch with him. I think that there's still more left in the tank. He's going to be, I want to say, is it 33? I think he's 32 32 right now. He's gonna hate me.
32. He's going
Yeah,
to turn 33 on July 6th.
there we go. Yeah, I know his birthday's in July. And so, it's good to see for his body that it's still responding the way it is. Obviously, the incredible defense. And you really think about the fact that elbow really bothered him. 2 years ago and last year, coming off of the recovery of that, not being able to have an off season where he trained like the way that he wanted to be able to be back to that health. And he will tell you, and he's right, you're never fully in full health. His body feels it. But he's pretty dialed in right now, and I think that he's gearing. The other thing, Darnay, as we've talked about, is his average, right? His hits were just he was getting a lot of hits. He was getting a lot of extra base hits, but he wasn't getting the power. I think that he is someone that, as we know, in the summer, he is, like we saw with that comment earlier, he does heat up more when the weather warms and as the season gets going. But we've been seeing some of that power coming already, and I think that that's what we're going to continue seeing from him.
Yeah, and isn't it just like, I think it was reasonable to be concerned through 2023 and the first couple months of 2024. Hey, is this just what we've got with Manny Machado? Is he kind of on the other side of his prime, and maybe this is what we're going to be looking at? And so the fact that he did perform at kind of an MVP level the last few months of last year and has started the way that he has, I think alleviates some of those concerns, especially when there are those concerns with Xander Bogaerts, another big money guy that has not performed and has not been the same since. If you have that and Manny Machado, that puts you in a tough spot. But Manny playing the way you would expect him to, maybe you want just a little bit more power. Again, it seems to be coming around. I think that gives you a little bit more hope, just kind of projecting forward, and less concern of like, okay, maybe things are tailing off a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that I wouldn't be surprised if he goes into, like you said, a mini slump or a little bit of a downturn at some point. I mean, it's common, and Manny even would say it's common, right, to ride some of the waves and some of the roller coaster, as they would say, throughout a season. But what's this lineup is a little interesting, right? I mean, this Padres lineup, right now you've got Jackson Merrill also not hitting as well as he did at the beginning of the season. Cronenworth, I think, is doing a little bit more consistently, doing a little bit better than he was, but there's still some holes there in the lineup, like you said, when you get to that middle of the lineup, and then the bottom of the lineup as well. But when you don't have Fernando hitting the way he wants to, and then you've got Arraez not quite where he is either. I mean, Arraez is fantastic, but he's not quite where he usually is. I don't believe the numbers are there yet. Correct me if I'm wrong. But then, yeah, so you've got a little start and stop in this lineup, and that's pretty normal, right? I mean, you're never going to have a lineup. Well, not never, but it's pretty rare to have a lineup hitting on all cylinders, 1 through 9 all the time. But hopefully they'll be able to find a little bit more, some more pockets where they can capitalize, on getting some runners in and on passing the baton, which is what they're so good at and what they're known for. But right now it's like a lot of start and stop, which I think is hurting them as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Merrill, and
am I dreaming that? I feel like he hasn't been. Yeah.
Yes. So last 20 games before today, he's hitting 205 with a 561 OPS, 1 homer, 16 hits, 22 strikeouts. So it hasn't been quite as glaring, I would say, and even Xander for I think a big stretch of the season is like, it's not great, but it doesn't feel like it's the end of the world.
Right. Good point.
Again, Jackson just set the bar so high with the way he started the season. So there's, I guess we can kind of maybe answer our ultimate question with this point, like Tatis, it's going to come around. Merrill, it's going to come around.
Yeah.
Arraez, you expect it to. Xander Bogaerts, I don't know. Health is going to play into that. But maybe that gives us hope that they're going to turn the page. They're going to hit their stride, because it's not like they're doing all this with everybody hitting like 280,
And I'm so glad you pointed that out. And you said Merrill's numbers, because it reminded me that you're right. Merrill's been getting on base, but he hasn't been driven in. And some of that has been also Xander not being able to get those hits in, or the middle of the lineup not being able to pull him in. So good points there with him and Manny getting on base too. But Yes, I think that I mean, it's baseball, who knows? But I think that we're going to start to see some of them coming back around. It is always a weird and very jarring thing when so much of the lineup goes quiet and cold at the same time. But I don't think that that's going to last. I think we've already started to see some of them start to come out of it, and get back to some of those numbers. And I also think what you just said is really accurate. They're not going to also probably sustain 14-3 and that really hot start that they had at the beginning of the season. So there's some middle ground there that I think is going to be a little bit more comfortable for them. Maybe not as torridly hot, but also not as frigidly cold, and I think that that's going to come for most of them. Like you mentioned, you just went through the lineup and I think pretty well hit on it, and I think there's still question marks, right? With left field, there's some question marks there at the bottom of the lineup. But if the lineup is hitting, pretty well, you can absorb some of those not so great bats. You can absorb some of those cold spots. It's just that so much of it went cold at one time during that one stretch. So hopefully they're out of that.
I'm so glad we finally did this.
So am I. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. It is very much appreciated. You're the best. Always a blast to run into you. Hopefully, I would imagine that'll probably happen next week. Dodgers in town. It's going to be a busy clubhouse. So looking forward to that.
I can't believe that they're playing the Dodgers for the first time next week. It's crazy. Yeah. So that's going to be fun. I look forward to seeing you as well. Hopefully I didn't say anything that gets me in trouble on this podcast, but I really appreciate being with you, Darnay. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Annie. Appreciate it.